Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our National Crime Victims' Rights Week commemorative virtual event. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. First, all lines are on mute. If you experience any technical difficulties at any point during our presentation, please explain your problem through the chat feature, and we will try our best to address the issue. Please subscribe to New Jersey OAG on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Flickr for the latest updates on news and information from our office. For crime victim resources, please visit njoag.gov and click on the Victims of Crime Compensation Office under the Divisions tab. The full recording of today's program will be available on our YouTube page within 24 hours. Now, I'd like to hand things off to our first speaker today, the Director of our Division of Criminal Justice, Veronica Allende.
Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the New Jersey Attorney General's Office's special virtual event in commemoration of National Crime Victims' Rights Week. As you probably know, each year, Congress declares 1 week in April as Crime Victims' Rights Week to honor and recognize victims of crime and those who assist them. This year, the Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime declared April 18th to the 24th as this year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and that is what brings us here today. This incredibly uplifting and informative event, which is co-sponsored by the Victims of Crime Compensation Office, VCCO, and the State Office of Victim Witness Advocacy, SAVWA, is usually hosted in person when we are, of course, not in the middle of a global pandemic. And it is usually one of my favorite events of the year to host, as we take time to pay respect to all of our victims of crime, to thank the many individuals who support them through vital services, and to highlight the role law enforcement plays in securing them justice. And although we cannot celebrate these achievements in person this year, I am thankful to the members of our office and, of course, our partner agencies for putting together a robust virtual presentation that will adhere to this year's national theme and honor the spirit of that. Support victims, build trust, engage communities. I'm also thankful that we have an opportunity today to award the 2021 Office of Attorney General Excellence Awards for Victims' Justice to two very deserving recipients, Sierra Hart of the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence, and Diane Johnson, Victim Witness Coordinator for the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office. Congratulations to you both, and thank you for your tireless service to victims throughout New Jersey. I'm also thankful to the members of VCCO and SAVWA for your efforts to host this year's virtual program, with special thanks to VCCO Director Mary Ellen Bonsper, Melissa Miller of SAVWA, Elizabeth E. Rubin, Special Advisor to the Attorney General, and DCJ's own Chief of Staff Jennifer Stonerod. I'd also like to give special thanks to our keynote speaker, Fatima Lauren Dreyer Mohammed, Executive Director of the Health Alliance for Violence Intervention, and to all of our distinguished panelists. And lastly, thanks to all of you for tuning into today's program and for all of the work that you do day to day to assist in ensuring that crime victims in New Jersey receive the best possible support when dealing with truly difficult circumstances, especially the incredible work that has continued despite the fact that we have had so many changes this past year. Without further ado, it is now my honor to welcome our next distinguished speaker to help welcome you all today, Attorney General Gurbir Grewal.
Good morning, everyone. I'm New Jersey Attorney General Gurbir Grewal, and thank you for joining us for our annual Crime Victims' Rights Week event. This year's theme is Support Victims, Build Trust, Engage Communities. The Department of Law and Public Safety works every day to embody this theme by serving all victims in all settings. Last week, I issued a directive cracking down on sexual misconduct by professionals licensed by the 51 boards and committees operating under the supervision of the Division of Consumer Affairs. This directive will affect approximately 700,000 licensees, including physicians, massage therapists, and counselors. It's intended to prevent repeat victimization by providing justice for victims. We're also serving victims who have often been overlooked, like gun violence victims. in an effort to build trust and to create safety in New Jersey's communities most devastated by violence. Today, you'll hear a keynote speech from Fatima Dreyer, Executive Director of HAVI, about the transformative power of serving these victims. You'll also hear from leaders in victim services about their work to minimize disruptions during COVID-19. And finally, the recipients of the 2021 Office of the Attorney General Excellence Awards for Victims' Justice will receive their well-deserved recognition. We thank them for their service to victims, and we thank you for joining us on this important day when we stand in solidarity with victims and honor those who serve them.
Hello, my name is Fatima Loren Dreyer, Executive Director of the Health Alliance for Violence Intervention. I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I want to also thank Governor Phil Murphy, Attorney General Agrawal, Acting Administrator Cranford, and Special Advisor Eve Rootman. It is such an honor to be here. Victim services work is very personal to me, not just because I was born and raised in New Jersey, but because I am myself a survivor and my loved ones are survivors. My father was a young man when he first had a gun put to his head. I remember as a little girl seeing him burst through the door, covered in blood, because he was caught in the cycle of violence. He took out his aggression on my mother. He was in and out of prison most of my life, and as a result, my family became homeless when I was only 8 years old. A man took us in, and ultimately, I became the victim of sexual abuse. My school found out. The police came and took me out of school. They took me to the police station to write a report without my mother or any other family member present. The last time I interacted with police officers, they were violently arresting my father. I was terrified, not just because of the police, but because I didn't want our family to become homeless again. The trauma of that day lived on in my nightmares for years. The incidents of abuse, yes, but also the way in which help came. My story is just one example of how the intersecting layers of trauma impact victims and relates to structural racism. First, gun violence is the leading cause of death for African American boys and men, and the second leading cause of death for Latino men. This means that our exposure to violence and the police is significantly higher than in white communities. Second, even though about 13% of New Jersey's population is Black, we make up nearly 50% of the homeless population. And finally, parents and children experience trauma at the same time, which means this trauma compounds across families and across generations. The theme of Crime Victims' Rights Week is supporting victims, building trust, and engaging communities. If we truly want to talk about building trust, we need to acknowledge that survivors are disproportionately people of color, and the victim services infrastructure has not been designed with us in mind. I find it particularly powerful that Victims' Rights Week has come on the heels of the Derek Chauvin trial, and more recently the death of Daunte Wright. We have seen the sheer magnitude of community trauma, both locally and nationally. But let's talk about New Jersey. Not all violence in New Jersey makes national headlines. Let's talk about the loss of Travis Giles Jr. in Camden. His life matters. The life of 16-year-old Kaheem Taylor, who died just a few blocks from my home in Jersey City. His life matters. And all those whose names we don't know, their lives matter. By one estimate of a victims' rights group in Boston, every homicide, there is an estimated 33 co-survivors, parents, siblings, cousins, neighbors, all grieving that loss. Now imagine this compounded over time. Despite all of this trauma, all of this tragedy, there are signs of hope. I'm actually proud of my home state, New Jersey. I've worked very closely with efforts in Newark, so I'm going to start there. In 2015, Newark embarked on a new paradigm for public safety, launching the Newark Community Street Team and leveraging the consent decree to reimagine policing. In 2017, New Jersey's first hospital-based violence intervention program established a partnership, New York Community Street Team and University Hospital, which continues to expand to this day. I am proud to have worked closely with Director Keisha Uri, and NCST on the Trauma to Trust program, which brings police and community together to discuss the whole ecology of trauma within communities of color, boasting such participants as Deputy Attorney General Bryn Whittle. Statewide, New Jersey has made history, making the largest investment in VOCA funding to support the development of hospital-based violence intervention programs, which address the scourge of cyclical violence in communities of color. They have launched 9 cities: Trenton, Paterson, Atlantic City, Camden, Newark, New Brunswick, Monmouth County, Jersey City, and Elizabeth. These programs support victims of community violence through the development of robust community hospital partnerships that focus on addressing the social determinants of health. New Jersey has also invested in trauma recovery centers, which allow communities to center healing from trauma in a way that is culturally responsive, adaptive, and collectively situated. These victim services strategies are led or informed by people within the community who have been directly impacted. To quote Glennie Martin, "Those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution." VOCA is also working to remove barriers that make access to VCCO frictionless and ensuring that all victims have access to services without unfair requirements. As the technical assistance provider for New Jersey HVIP program, the Javi is proud to work closely with the 9 sites to understand structural racism and the intersecting layers of trauma. It is our work to ensure that all programs are equitable and addressing the needs not only of patients, but of the communities in which these programs exist. And beyond this, it will take all of us to make racial equity a cornerstone of victim services and a component of a larger ecosystem of racially equitable public health. I want to leave you with 3 opportunities to advance racial equity in victim services. 1. Begin with your own education. To paraphrase Dr. Beverly Tatum, I would invite you to think of racism as a smog we all breathe, and education a filter that allows us to breathe a little better. We don't know what we don't understand. So seek to understand racism as a lifelong practice. There are a number of thoughtful, powerful books that help each and every one of us take steps to address racism. Books like White Fragility by Robert DiAngelo and Caste by Isabella Wilkinson. Agencies can host book clubs to build peer support on these incredibly important conversations. 2. Continue to hire people of color in victim services and seek the input of survivors of color throughout the agency, particularly harder to reach populations like young people and male survivors of violence. These engagements may require greater effort. Be sure to compensate and support those who participate. If you flex this muscle, over time, you will go a long way building greater trust within communities. HVIPs and TRCs can be involved and actually provide a resource to connect survivors to systems in ways that are empowering and impactful. 3. Become self-monitoring. Adopt a framework to evaluate the barriers people of color may face across your services and attend to those structural barriers. Continue to reflect on opportunities to grow and identify and hire experts who can help you get there. you have an opportunity to develop compelling new ways to understand and serve victims that not only impacts the state of New Jersey, but helps advance the field nationally. The hobby looks forward to working alongside the state to support HVIPs as they continue to grow and more broadly support you as part of a vast ecosystem. If we continue to work together, we can build trust and engage communities in ways that have not yet been seen. And in doing so, create a future in which young people and families are safe, supported, and empowered. Thank you.
Since 1981, National Crime Victim Rights Week has been a time to renew our commitment to serving all victims of crime, to acknowledge the achievement in victim services and allied professions, to honor those who have gone above and beyond in their service to others, and to remember crime victims and survivors. Each year in the spring, victim service providers, justice professionals, and community advocates across the state come together to reflect upon milestones of the past year and to rededicate their efforts towards the furtherance of victims' rights. Last year, VCCO achieved a major milestone with amendments to our governing statute that enabled the office to provide more services to a larger array of victims of crime. I am pleased to tell you that as of August 1st, legal assistance has now been expanded to include assistance in the enforcement of victims' rights in all courts, family law matters, obtaining protective and restraining orders, employment matters, accessing public benefits, life planning, and any other situation for which an eligible crime victim needs legal services related to their victimization. And in order to meet those needs, attorney fees have been increased to $275 per hour with a maximum benefit of $10,000. Other benefits have increased as well. The office may now issue an emergency award up to $7,500 to assist with an eligible benefit such as a funeral burial, and up to $1,000 for victims eligible for stolen cash reimbursement. The office now recognizes homicide survivors as direct victims of crime. And as a direct victim, the deceased's spouse, parent, legal guardian, grandparent, child, sibling, domestic or civil union partner, or parent of the decedent's child would be entitled to the same services afforded to any other crime victim. Additional crime types have been added. Victims of simple assault, disorderly conduct, or a motor vehicle incident resulting in an injury or death where the driver left the scene are now eligible to apply for assistance. Victims now have 5 years from the date of their crime or their 18th birthday to file an application. And once their claim is approved, there is no limit for submitting expenses. A victim may continue receiving services until their maximum claim award. Victims who are incarcerated will no longer be denied assistance because they are incarcerated. This applies to victims who became incarcerated unrelated to their crime injury, and those victims who were injured while incarcerated. Cases where victims have outstanding violent crime penalty assessments will now have their assessments deducted from their award instead of preventing their claim from being approved. New rules apply in determining if a victim contributed to their injury. The VCCO may now only consider relevant evidence when determining that a victim's conduct contributed to or was the proximate cause of their injury or death. And should contribution be established in a homicide, the office is authorized to make a limited award for funeral expenses, mental health services, loss of support for dependent children, and attorney fees. Finally, The office is now required to process claims within 90 days upon receipt of a completed application and all the necessary information needed to make a determination of eligibility. However, the 90-day determination may be extended for good cause if an administrative closure would otherwise result. None of these changes would have been possible without the support of Attorney General Graywall, Special Advisor for Victim Services Elizabeth Rubin, and this administration, and their vision to ensure that all victims are eligible to receive needed services and are treated with fairness, compassion, and respect. Even now, VCCO and this administration continues in its efforts to ensure services are made available to all victims. Currently, the office has proposed changes to our regulations to better serve crime victims throughout the state and to comport with the legislative changes made to our governing statute. If approved, these additional changes would make available new kinds of assistance particular to previously underserved victims of human trafficking, allow the office to consider a deceased victim's potential income in determining a surviving dependent's loss of support, lessen the burden of proof to credible evidence when submitting supporting documentation, no longer require the return of a security deposit from a landlord, as it creates an undue financial hardship for victims seeking to reuse it, no longer preclude victims with non-indictable warrants or active criminal charges from receiving services, and ensure all victims are eligible to receive an award for compensation if there exists an emergent need for housing in order to protect the victim's physical safety, notwithstanding any indictable warrants or active criminal charges. Even with these changes, our success as an agency would not have been possible without you, our victim service providers, justice professionals, and community advocates, all working together to help victims of crime and survivors. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for all your dedication and hard work. Finally, I wish to give a shout out to the VCCO staff who have done a tremendous job in processing claims while working remotely through the pandemic. VCCO staff, you rock. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Rubin. I'm a Special Advisor for Victim Services to the Attorney General. And I would like to show you the proclamation from Governor Phil Murphy and thank the governor for this proclamation that proclaims April 18th through the 24th as Crime Victims' Rights Week and reaffirms New Jersey's commitment to creating a victim service and criminal justice response that assists all victims of crime during Crime Victims' Rights Week and throughout the year, and for expressing its sincere gratitude and appreciation for community members, victim services providers, and criminal justice professionals who are committed to improving our response to all victims of crime so that they may find relevant assistance, support, justice, and peace. So again, we thank the governor for this powerful proclamation. We hope you enjoy your panel today. The panel today, we're going to have some great discussions for Crime Victims' Rights Week. Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. We are going to get started with our panel discussion, and soon you will see an esteemed panel of service providers, and we're going to talk about an array of topics. First, I'm Assistant Attorney General and Chief of Staff of the Division of Criminal Justice, Jennifer Stonrod. And now I'd like to start with our panelists. I'll start with you, Jane. You'd like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to the Office of the Attorney General for inviting me to be a member of the panel. I am from the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office. I'm the Forensic Nurse Examiner and Sexual Assault Response Team Coordinator. And today I'm here as the Director Spokesperson for the Forensic Nurse Coordinators Association, representing my fellow coordinators throughout the state.
Okay. Next, why don't we turn it over to Director Bonsper? I know we heard just wonderful remarks from you.
Thank you, Jen. Hi, my name is Mary Ellen Bonsper, and I am the Director of the Victims of Crime Compensation Office.
Okay. And next, Selena.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Attorney General Graywall, Chief of Staff Jennifer Stone, Tara Camp, who put this all together for us, and the panelists, and everybody who's worked to put this program together. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, next, Navneet, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good morning, and thank you to the Office of Attorney General for coordinating and having us here today. My name is Navneet Bala, and I am the board member for New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence, and I'm also the executive director of Manavi. In Manavi, we provide culturally specific services to South Asian survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence, and the coalition supports 32 programs across the state that provide direct services in New Jersey.
Excellent. And last, Melissa Miller, who I work very closely with at the Division of Criminal Justice.
Hi, good morning. I'm Melissa Miller. I'm the Victim Witness Coordinator for the Division of Criminal Justice in the Attorney General's office. And thank you for having me on the panel.
So I'm excited about this panel because you all bring so much information to the table. And we know that this last year has been so challenging. COVID-19 was nothing that any of us could ever have imagined. But it didn't stop any of you and any of your agencies from continuing to provide amazing services to crime victims and survivors and witnesses. So in incorporating this year's theme that we've heard a lot about, supporting victims, building trust, engaging communities, one of the most challenging thing is how do you engage communities when we've had COVID-19, when there's stay-at-home orders? What are we doing? So I thought that was a really important place to start. So I'm going to start with you, Jane, about what has been the biggest challenge that you've seen for the forensic nurse examiners, the SART coordinators, for your service community in overcoming the challenges that COVID-19's presented? How are you assisting crime victims? What have you seen over the course of the last year?
Well, our first challenge, we have a little bit of a different set of challenges, but our first challenge was PPE for our nurses and to keep them safe. The Forensic Nurse Coordinators Association negotiated with the state for PPE. Shout out to Bill Cranford, who was very helpful and very supportive to us in the beginning of the pandemic. Many of you can probably recall how short supply there was of PPE, and so he really helped us out and been able to provide that PPE for our nurses. So as far as assisting our victims, the forensic nurses did a little bit of additional screening when they were called to the hospital to see patients, and we continued to see those patients throughout the pandemic for forensic medical exams. Hospitals were very supportive partners for us throughout the state. We did have less patients that came to see us in the emergency department due to the uncertainty. You know, one of the things that was different for us as members of the SART was some SART team members were not responding in person due to the uncertainty and safety issues. So we were using digital communication for them, and it was really a collaboration with all of the SART team members to meet the needs of the patients that we serve. That's improving, of course, as we move through the pandemic, but some restrictions, of course, do continue, particularly in those high COVID areas that remain. But we are moving along and continue to see those patients in the emergency department.
Right. So it sounds like even though there was some obstacles, you were still able to service survivors that would show up at hospital facilities and even afford them the SART response team in full. So law enforcement, our confidential sexual violence advocates, and the forensic nurse examiners were all available. So nothing stopped that team from responding. We just had to change a little bit about what we were doing.
Sure, a little bit of alteration in our normal.
Yep.
I think we're all accustomed to that.
Right. Navneet, I'll turn to you since, this has really been difficult for all our disciplines in how, we know the best way at times is in-person interaction. So how did you see the Navi and the coalition overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge that I'd say from Manvi's perspective and also from the coalition's perspective, I feel that we all know communities of color and marginalized communities are disproportionately impacted by COVID. And at the same time, they also have disproportionate experiences of domestic violence. So the survivors that we've served and we continue to serve, we know they have intersecting identities based on race and gender identity, which makes it so much harder for the survivors to access resources and services in the same way that perhaps they used to do pre-COVID or that other agencies may do. So some of the biggest challenges I think I'd say is that very often agencies like ours talk about emergent needs, but the reality is during COVID, every single need that we were seeing the survivors had was an emergent need. Food security, financial security, mental health support, language access has been a significant barrier for the survivors that we serve. Especially during COVID, where they have no access to technology or don't know how to navigate that technology, whether it be hearings or social services. But Manvi has ensured that we continue to provide our services nonstop. We did not have any interruption in our services. Throughout COVID, we have a 24-hour hotline. We have a transitional home where we have continued to provide services. And at the same time, all the other culturally specific and linguistically appropriate services we have continued to provide. And we've also seen that survivors have been able to reach us and made our services accessible through whether it's Facebook, Instagram, and more unconventional ways for survivors to be able to connect us. And the only one last thing I will say that I think, the coalition has been very supportive in ensuring and been intentional in providing that support system and services to communities of color who need it most during COVID.
Right. So I'm sure that you're seeing, outreach through social media, like you just mentioned, text messages, phone
Yes.
calls. So was that
Yes.
a big departure from what you saw before COVID? Or had the technology
Absolutely.
piece been there, or did this just, come from COVID?
So we've always had the social media and always had technology, but I think the one thing that we noticed was the uptick in the ways that we were hearing from survivors. So although we've had a 24-hour hotline for many, many years, we did see the direct messaging and the social media contact through more unconventional means was definitely on the increase. So we definitely saw that. And also I think I'd say that the volunteers and the staff have also done a phenomenal job in doing outreach in more unconventional ways and doing it more remotely and making sure that we meet survivors where they're at. And it's been difficult for survivors and staff and volunteers. And the only other thing that I'll say that I think has been wonderful in how all of our agencies have come together remotely and along with the coalition, that support system has been there.
Right. Yes, it definitely takes everybody working together as a team to figure out how are we going to reach our communities? How are we going to make sure that everyone knows we're here for them? So this is a good transition to Selena, because you could speak from victim witness perspective from your county and from the coordinators. This is much different, right? How many times did you have in-person interaction with victims, survivors, witnesses that could come to your office? So, how has COVID-19 impacted the interaction of the county victim witness offices? And what have you been doing to overcome those challenges and your coordinators?
So, this COVID-19 pandemic has thrusted all of us into this, challenging, unprecedented challenges that we all face. And I think as victim witness coordinators, when this happened in the mid of March and everything just completely shut down, resources shut down, social service agencies shut down, but we're the criminal justice system. We can't shut down. We can't tell victims, okay, wait a couple weeks, we'll talk to you later. That was not an option. And our open door policy ceased to exist. Victims were, coming into our office with whether they needed something, if they were having a hard time, a difficult time, whether it was filling out a BCCO application, working through a court proceeding, and that just had to halt, abruptly. So I think our first course of action, with the support of my prosecutor in Hudson County, Prosecutor Suarez, we made sure that we had put together a letter that went with all the notifications. We're here. This is our email address. These are other resources. This is ways of getting in contact with us. Another thing that we did is, although our office was shut down, we had the support to have at least one advocate in the office at all times. So that way those phones were, managed, and we were able to make sure that those people who were unable no longer to come to our office, that they could call and make sure that we were making those connections with the resources. Even connecting with the resources could be difficult. When we're victim witness coordinators, we're such a connector to so many different agencies, whether they're victim service agencies, social service agencies, and even within the courts, the family court, the juvenile court system. When a victim comes in, we can easily walk them around, kind of guide them through that. And that's not something we were able to do. So it was a lot of phone calls, staying on the phone with them as they, called another agency. We did a lot of conference calls because we physically couldn't be there. We also did a lot of FaceTiming and Zoom. And, and that played into, and I think Navdeep brought that up, is the technological challenges that we faced. Not everybody has a computer. Not everybody's been on Zoom or knows how to navigate through that. So there were a lot of times of being on the other end of the phone, walking step through step of how to download certain apps and how to, navigate and pick up certain programs, navigate through websites, helping them with telehealth appointments. So we couldn't be there in person, but we made every effort to make sure that we can assist them in any way possible. And thankfully, to my counterparts throughout the state, all the victim witness coordinators, we had multiple conversations on a daily basis of how they're navigating through it. So it was, really helpful to have that other support and, the ideas flowing through of how we can make sure that our victims are being serviced through COVID.
And this, as you talk about statewide, it's a good transition to talk to Melissa Miller because, she's servicing cases handled by the Division of Criminal Justice, which means helping navigate the criminal justice system statewide. And there might be different parameters of different courthouses and courtrooms. So Melissa, can you speak to how this year presented challenges and how you work through them?
Similar to what Selena mentioned. So we definitely do lean on each other statewide, the 21 county coordinators and myself. So we will swap ideas on how to work with the victims in each county. So since the AG's office is covering all 21 counties, I will reach out to them to find out what's working in their county, what's not working, what's open, what's closed. One of the biggest challenges that I found was with counseling services. A lot of victims were looking to continue their counseling services in person, and most of that was virtual. So that's one of the things I'll reach out to the county and find out, what's going on, what are you using for your victims? So, all of the coordinators are very helpful in chiming in to find out, what services are working. But for the most part, Zoom, the virtual court has been working pretty good with keeping things going. FaceTime works. I think a lot of our victims do know how to use FaceTime on their phones, and they will use it with or without permission. Texting, emailing works. And definitely, with our automated letters, most of the counties do have that now. I have utilized the help of a lot of the counties with getting automated letters going. Even if our office doesn't use it yet, I have implemented using that. So it keeps our victims informed and up to speed on the case status. So they're pretty patient. Most of the families know what social distancing means. They know they have to be patient. So That's one of the challenges, that we don't know when the pandemic will end. Some things are moving and some things are not. So, we just have to keep them informed, and they'll reach out to us, some more proactive than others, but I think for the most part, we've gotten through it. Yeah.
Right, as a team. And Mary Ellen, I'll ask you now, we've heard the wonderful things that VCCO and your team are doing, and they do rock, you are right. But this has been challenging, because if I can't come in and fill out an application, or I can't get to you, how has it changed what VCCO did this past year in such a transformative year? And how did you and your team overcome those challenges?
Right, that was one of our biggest challenges. The first thing we had to do is how to make ourselves accessible to crime victims, once the agencies shut down. And even though we have online application, the ability for victims to file online, we also receive maybe about 130 victims that walk into our office every month that require assistance with filling out the application. And those were the victims that we were most concerned with. These are victims who either have poor language skills, they don't speak English well, they don't have access to a computer, or they find the form very challenging for them and they need assistance with filling it out. And that's what we're there for. So how do we reach these people? And what we ended up doing was we posted signs in our lobbies, because we knew they were still coming in, and we created a call center. So what they did was, by calling the switchboard and hitting the prompt 4, they were able to be transferred to someone, or someone would call them back if they left a message, and we were taking applications over the phone. So if they weren't able to go to an agency that could assist them with the application, and they didn't have access to filing a claim online, we would actually take that application over the phone, and any documentation that they could provide, they could just take a photo off of their phone and email it to us, and we would just upload it into our system. All right. For the other victims with the online applications, that was the other way we were handling it. We set up our fax machine for people who had the ability to fax, that our fax machine would actually take the documents and upload it into our computer system. So really, the IT department at the Attorney General's office, and giving us supplies and giving us computers to work from home. Everybody's been really tremendous and amazing in setting us up to work at home and be able to help crime victims. Once we were able to establish that, and then we had a flow where victims were able to make applications one way or another, we then set up our next challenge was getting documentation. All these businesses shut down. So not only do I get an application from a victim, but now if they have loss of earnings or if they have medical records, we need to verify that information, and employers were shut down. There was no way to be able to prove, or to be able to support that the victim was out of work. So we were issuing emergency awards. We were giving them emergency awards with the preponderance of credible evidence that these victims were victimized. We know that they have medical bills, that they were out of work. If they had a doctor who was shut down and not able to provide medical records, we relaxed our standards. We weren't requiring that. If we got bills without insurance statements, we were processing bills just based on what if it showed that there was an insurance payment on the bill and what the copay was. So we were trying to work with what we could, with the little information that we were able to receive in the beginning. Later on, providers, doctors were starting to do the telemedicine, which was wonderful. Victims were able to start receiving counseling services at that time, and VCCO was paying for any telemedicine medical expenses that came into the office. So, there was a lot of things. You just have to be able to make adjustments for the time, for this pandemic that nobody ever expected, and how do we handle with it? So extraordinary circumstances, we just had to deal with it in extraordinary measures to meet the needs for the crime victims. Sorry.
And I think, there's so many service providers and advocates watching today. Let's talk about the lessons learned. I'll open it up to the group. What do we think the best mechanism was for sharing information, getting information out there? Is there something that you found was more successful than other? Was it posting things on social media? Was it emails? What did you find to be really the most effective way to get information? And I'll pose it to the group. You know, I could start with Navneet. Was there a way that you felt that you were really able to get the information out there?
Yes, I think so. One of the things that was we found effective early on, or rather when we were in the thick of COVID, was we started doing a series of webinars, and it was one after the other. So we basically did a webinar on every single service that Manavi provides, and we had all the staff engaged as a team, and we had every single staff member out there, and this was whether it's through Facebook, whether it was Instagram Live, and then even in the videos that we kept those videos and kept running them over and over again, where we talked about how we provide counseling remotely, how we do support groups remotely. In fact, I'm not sure how other agencies felt, but we felt that our support groups were much more and much better attended remotely than they used to be in person. I see Jane is nodding her head, right, and Selena. So I think we found the support groups were very well attended, and then we found the webinars that we did on legal advocacy, the legal services that we provide, the free legal clinics we provide, sexual assault support services, our transitional home, which is one of our most valuable services. It's one of the only culturally specific South Asian transitional homes on the East Coast. And so it's talking about that and the services we provide there, and just ensuring that, and even the hotline, talking about the fact that the 24-hour hotline is staffed by advocates that speak all the diverse South Asian languages, and pointing out things like staff speak all the South Asian languages. Generally, I think making sure that we were as accessible and out there, not just on social media, but also connecting with other local community groups and making ourselves accessible.
That's great. That's great. How about Selena or Melissa? Was there a mechanism you found that helped the most?
Echoing echoing a lot of what Nanit said is, you know, I know our office was using our social media platforms, which is a great way to get out there and get that information out there, as well as the notifications. You know, in Hudson County, there's thousands and thousands of notifications that go out to victims. So just making sure within those notifications that they were being informed of how to reach out to us, how to contact us, making sure we were talking to our resources, our county resources, saying, hey, listen, we're here. You know, there's an advocate in the office if they need to call. So making sure that when they were talking to victims, they knew that information and they were able to pass that along. The last thing a victim wants to hear is, I don't know, or no. So you want to make sure that you have that information, you have it available to them, and that you're able to help them. Because with everything else going on with COVID, everything else was in limbo. And the last thing I think that I made sure, as well as the other coordinators and the other panelists, you don't want to leave a victim in limbo. You want to make sure that you're guiding them and giving them all the resources that they need in such a challenging time.
One of the other initiatives we did at VCCO was that the staff would make initial contact with the victim, so that even as the application, when it first comes in, we have our intake unit, they reached out, they make calls. So, you know, if they were unable to provide information, or, you know, to follow up for information that they needed to send in, and we would try to figure out ways to help them, you know, to provide information so that we could process their claim. When it got assigned to an investigator, the investigator would then also make contact with the victim, introducing themselves, saying that they are the investigator assigned to their case, and to go over the claim with them, so that they felt that, you know, even during this crisis, that there was still help available and that somebody cared. You know, so we were just trying to maintain contact, and we were processing cases very quickly that way.
Sure. Jane, was there anything that you saw that was effective in making information reach the communities that, you know, you and F&E serve, and also I know from the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office?
Well, I think that all of our community partners, the Office of Victim Witness in the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office, Women's Space is our rape care advocacy service in Mercer County. They have a hotline. I think communication amongst team members was very important, in that law enforcement knew that, you know, we would respond to the hospital, that that patients could then get examinations in the hospital as well. I think just a lot of collaboration amongst everyone, talking to each other, and like Naveed said, that electronic communication and bringing people together amongst team members was important, just as all the other communications that we use, email, phone calls, Zoom, all that we have now. I know a lot of people talk about having Zoom fatigue, but I think it really, really helped us and it was a greater positive than it was a negative. So we have to thank our community partners for reaching out to those victims, reaching out to those patients, and letting them know that all of the services that were available from all of the people that are on this panel, all the people that we work with every day.
And Melissa,
I wanted to add one thing.
Go ahead, Naveed. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, Melissa, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to mention and ask Melissa, because she's in a unique position where sometimes she gets calls for cases that are being handled at the county level or some other office. Where do you think most people were getting information? Is it web-based? Were they expressing how they were getting to you?
I think so. Most people are Googling and getting information on the web. A lot of people were getting information from the portal, and somehow that defaults to the web. So, it doesn't take much to refer them to one of the victim witness coordinators on the county level and get back to them very fast. So, it's been working out fine. Yeah. So using the website, and there's a link on the website for all the county offices. So I think information is easily found on the website.
Okay. Naveed, please, what were you going to mention?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to share, I wear two hats as executive director at Manavi and a board member of the coalition. And now to share the coalition's perspective, I found, well, on both sides, really, I felt, similar to what Jane was saying earlier, actually, that I felt so much more connected, in that I felt like I got to learn and how to not only be supported, but also how to support other agencies. And, there were, and I think coalition played a really crucial part in that we used to have, I remember, weekly calls. I mean, there would be like 2-hour weekly calls with all the EDs, all the executive directors across the state, because ultimately, all member agencies have felt that strain and that lack of support and the pressure and limited resources. So for the coalition to create that space, 2 hours every week, where we all would literally connect, I have to say I started to look forward to those, because I'd start my morning on Thursdays thinking, okay, I'm not doing this alone. Manavi's not doing this alone. There are all these other 32 agencies across the state who are doing it, and we pool resources, have conversations, create. And I think the biggest piece for me, at least as an executive director, was to feel supported and not feel isolated, which has been a huge drawback during COVID for all of us. So I think the same goes for the staff, for the volunteers, for executive directors, everybody here. And I think the coalition, having that network has really been helpful for us to navigate COVID.
And I think you mentioned something that's really important for us to discuss, is that to feel supported. And this is also personal, right? It isn't just in your professional capacity to be a service provider and help, but everyone was affected by COVID. So everybody is dealing with COVID in their own personal way, and then coming to the table and trying to help others. Did you see that be an added stressor? Because at a time where you're trying to give support, you also need to be supported because of all the uncertainty last March brought. So did you see that also as an impact, that, we had to have a team effect because everybody needed help in this field? And I don't know if any of you want to speak to how you saw that. I mean, Jane, you would be probably a good person to start, because we know our forensic nurse examiners are going into hospitals, and it's totally different, even with respect to policy and how it changed who could even access the hospitals, and survivors wanting to present to a hospital in a pandemic.
Right. There was a lot of uncertainty and fear amongst patients coming to the hospital. I don't know if any of you have been to a hospital emergency room lately, but it looks very different than it did before. And, hospitals have to, go with serving their communities, taking care of their patients and their staff and the resources they have, and public safety. So that was a big deal. And the forensic nurses were responding whenever we got the call. We went, and to take a page out of Mary Ellen's book, they rocked, those forensic nurses, every single one of them.
They did. They rocked.
And the hospitals being our community partners, even when, they were searching for PPE too, but if a nurse needed something, the hospital was willing to give it to them as well. So I think that, like you said, collaboration and teamwork amongst everyone. There are still some restrictions, and they have to keep their community safe, and they have to keep and protect the outside community. So, we've all had to make alternative solutions to the way that we normally did things to meet the needs of our patient. And we're going to have to continue to do that to provide the really excellent client-centered care from all of our agencies.
Yep. And we all are survivor-centered. And, the truth is that this has been difficult professionally and personally for everyone. But all of you rock, and all of those that you represent, because you have not only lived and worked through the pandemic, but you've been amazing support to all of those that you and your agencies have come in contact with. That's how we have gotten through this, because of everybody relying and working on each other. And one other thing that I think looks really different, so we know presenting to a hospital is much different right now, and there's much more worry and concern for our survivors. But let's also talk a little bit about what going to court looks like, right? So I know Selena and Melissa could speak to this. That's a big change, right? So we don't have the ability to have our victims come and meet with you and walk over or take an elevator to a courtroom. What does court appearances look like? And, I'll start with you, Selena, and I'll go to you, Melissa.
So court appearances today very much look like what you're looking at now. They're on a screen. You're looking at, a judge. You're, hearing everything. And most court appearances, the victim can't be seen or heard, but they can view. And a lot of those court hearings is, and as I said before, we couldn't be there sitting in a courtroom, sitting next to them. It would be on the phone. Okay, you're on the website. Okay, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? And navigating them through that, and answering those questions as we're viewing it on the screen. There have been a very few hearings that have been held in person, but that can be challenging too, because it's limited, especially when you're dealing with homicide sentencings or more sensitive cases. Usually you would have many family members come, and maybe it was limited to one or two or tops three, and the amount of people that were allowed in the courtroom. So that was challenging, very different. There were Zoom hearings, and a funny story that during a sentencing, the judge was on the screen, but the only thing we saw was the judge's ear. So I had to text the assistant prosecutor saying, can he move the screen so that we can, at least see the judge's face. So, there's challenges, but, again, it does look very different, and hopefully things will move forward a little bit of, opening up those court hearings.
And Melissa, I know you were also navigating all different virtual courtrooms and helping and making sure you're getting information. So how did that work for you?
Similar to Selena, the big difference is if you're not in the courtroom, you don't know what the delays are. If you're not there in person, if something starts at 10 o'clock, you can't actually see if the judge is on break or if there's another case that's holding it up. So you'll have the families, calling you or texting you while you're waiting at the same time. So you just have to either be patient or maybe try to call or text or email the prosecutor or the DAG to find out what's going on. If there's too much of a delay, but you don't want to interrupt them as well while they're handling the case. So, it's a balancing it's a balance. So that's one of the big challenges with not being there in person. And as Lena said, when you are there in person, it's so limited to maybe 2 family members. It's a challenge, figuring out which 2 family members can come, for each case. I've even had some family members who unfortunately may have had COVID and just can't come due to timing. So they're upset about that. They may want it to be postponed, and that's not the case. That can't be done. So there definitely have been challenges with in-person hearings and the virtual hearings. And as Selena said, I've had some cases where virtual court, just the camera wasn't turned on, so you're wondering what's going on, and the hearing might even be over by the time you ask for final. So there can be some glitches with the virtual courts, but for the most part, it has worked out. It has worked out for the most part. But hopefully we will be back to in-person hearings sooner than later.
And Navneet, I know for our domestic violence victims, you can't always have somebody in court or go with them to these proceedings. So you're also supporting virtually. So I'm sure that's been, challenging too, that somebody can't just meet somebody and say, I'll be there with you. I'll go to court. I'll go to your final restraining order hearing with you. I'll be by your side. It's totally different. And I'm sure you've seen that and how to adjust and having everybody appear virtually, I'm imagining.
Yes, and it's been particularly difficult for the survivors that we serve because of the language access barrier. I can't emphasize that enough. We have seen language access is a significant barrier, period. During COVID, and with remote court hearings or accessing any services remotely, we've actually seen whether they may not be the right interpreter available or the right interpreter is not available on time. So we've actually had many situations where survivors' court hearings have had to be delayed over and over again. And the other piece is it's maybe not, there is an interpreter, but it's not the right dialect. So maybe there's like misinterpretation, or the technology has been a huge piece where we'll see or hear from survivors saying, I still haven't received the details of my case and it's tomorrow. Or it's like there's not enough time for them to really navigate on how to do it. And I'm so thankful to Manavi's staff and volunteers, because ultimately on the ground, they're having to remotely work with the survivor to try to navigate from 2 different places on how to use the computer, how to use to log in. So I think that has been very, very challenging, especially for communities with language access barriers. And the only other thing I didn't touch on, which I wanted to mention, was immigration status. That is a significant barrier for the communities we serve, but really all diverse communities, where if your immigration status is dependent on your abusive spouse, imagine the situation you're in at the best of times, let alone during COVID, where you're then really in quarantine with the abuser. So I think that has really made the situation much, much worse for survivors who may be undocumented or have immigration status dependent on the abuser.
Yep. Yeah.
Jen, can I share our hotline number? Can I share Manavi's hotline number here? Yeah, so anyone, so I can actually say the statewide too. So Manavi's 24-hour hotline number is 732-435-1414. And the statewide hotline, I also want to share that for everybody, 1-800-572-7233. So you can access services. And I think right now it's really important to know that you're not alone and you can call anytime during 24 hours.
That is a great segue into our next topic, that you are not alone. We're going to speak now directly to anybody who's out there watching this that's a survivor, that wants help, that needs help, that says, how do I get to Jane, to Mary Ellen, to Selena, to Navneet, to Melissa? So I'm going to have each of you basically speak to those that are watching today and explain to them, how do they reach out to you or the services or your agencies? How do they reach you? So I'm going to start with Selena. How does someone get in touch with an Office of Victim Witness Advocacy? How do they get to you?
So for the Hudson County Prosecutor's Office, Office of Victim Witness Advocacy, you can call us. We are there Monday through Fridays, 8 to 5. There is an advocate available there in our office to speak with you. That number is 201-795-6508. We also have an email address that is managed by our awesome advocates in my office. That's hudsonvw@hcpo.org. You can reach us, you can email us. Another great feature for resources that's available 24/7, it's available in the palm of your hand through your smartphones, is the Victim Witness Portal. That can be accessed 24/7. It has a whole host of state resources, national resources, county resources, and also too where a victim is able to navigate through their case, submit forms. So that has been a great tool as well during COVID.
Excellent. And I want to mention and give a thank you to Tara Camp, who's helping us with this panel behind the scenes, who's been amazing. She's placed in the chat access to our website, which has a lot of information to connect to all of you and to your agencies. And that's www.njoag.gov. But it's right there in that chat so that people can access that. But excellent, Selena. And let's go to Melissa. How is somebody watching going to reach out to you?
So that's my website, njoag.gov. My email is my last name, first initial, millerm@njdcj.org. The hotline is 866-326-7206, and my direct line is 609-376-7206. And since we're working remotely, I rarely use that number, but you can call it and it goes right to my email. And I call people back usually within an hour. Everybody who knows me knows I call you back so fast.
Yes, you do. And what's nice is I should also mention that with the State Office of Victim Witness Advocacy, which Melissa supports cases handled, investigated, and prosecuted by the Division of Criminal Justice, which includes our Office of Insurance Fraud Prosecutor and Office of Public Integrity and Accountability. So she works on those cases. Selena is coming from a prosecutor's office, so her victim witness advocates will handle cases that are handled by that prosecutor's office, but there's similarly county offices of victim witness advocacy in every county prosecutor's office. So if your case is being handled by the prosecutor's office, you have a victim witness advocate that's there. And a lot of times, for background, you will be able to, somebody will be getting in touch with you from either the state office or county office of victim witness advocacy on their own to give you information about the status of your case. So just so we have that background there. Jane, how about with forensic nurse examiners, SART, where are they going? Are they showing up at a hospital? What happens?
Yes, and we've talked a lot about showing up at the hospital today, and we want patients to continue to go there, and we'll continue to provide that care. Patients, victims can report to their local law enforcement agency. They all are aware of the SART response and the forensic nurse examiner, the forensic medical exam, and of course, are in Mercer County, but in every county, the Rape Care Advocacy Program. In Mercer County, it's Women's Space. They all have a 24/7 hotline. Women's Space, theirs is 609-394-9000. And they also are part of our team and have just a boatload of information and can help patients and direct them and guide them through that process. And the Office of Victim Witness Advocacy has a list on their website of all of the SART sites, and those are located in each county prosecutor's office as well. So there are many, many different ways, but just walking into an emergency room is the physical way that it can happen if no one has, as we've talked about here today, access to the internet and computers and all of those things. They can certainly walk in person into the emergency room, and they will also receive those services.
And a sexual assault survivor can go to a hospital facility, can go to a law enforcement agency, can reach out to a confidential sexual violence advocate. And that's where we're talking about our SART team, right? Our sexual assault response team, that any survivor is going to be provided the access at the survivor's choice to 1, 2, 3, all prongs, none of the prongs of the SART. We are survivor centered in New Jersey. So we make sure that if someone presents to a law enforcement agency, they're going to be provided what SART means and what that means to that survivor. And so if you show up at a police department, you're going to get assistance. If you show up at a hospital, you're going to get assistance. If you show up to one of the amazing service providers, you're going to get assistance. So I think what we're all saying here today, and we're all echoing it, is there is help. You can go to any of these agencies and we will help you. And you can see we all work together. So that's really, really important. Mary Ellen, so
Yes,
how VCCO, I can't show up at the building and fill out, but if I want to work with you on benefits, where am I going?
Well, if you have a computer, the best way would be to file online application with us at njvictims.org. And there you can access the online application. You are also able to upload documents. If you're able to provide all the information to us, we can actually assign it to an investigator the same day and work on your case and process it for payment, especially if you have an emergency need such as a relocation. You know, we're there for you. So again, I encourage people, if they can, to file online. If not, you can call our switchboard, which is 973-648-2107 and hit prompt 4, and you will be directed to somebody who will assist you with taking a phone application. So again, there's help available and we are there for you. If you have any questions, you could always direct your questions to njvictims@njvictims.org, and it will be directed and you will be responded to. But again, always remember there's help out there.
Absolutely. And I'm
Jen?
glad we're all, sure, Jane.
Just that little interconnected piece when Mary Ellen spoke. One of the things we see our patients in person, because that's how that works.
Right.
But we provide our patients with information to all of the agencies just about that you see here today in person. We give them the BCCO information. There's a little benefits in a nutshell, I think it's called. We give them the information regarding our local Office of Victim Witness in the prosecutor's office. We give them the information about our confidential sexual violence thing, in addition to medical follow-up and other things that go along with the care that they will need or seek in their recovery. And so that interconnectedness between all of us and all of the services really, it really truly is there.
And that's how we're doing this here.
And to echo what Mary Ellen and Jane were saying, you can always reach out to any of your Office of Victim Witness advocacies in any county, and we can help do the application with you over the phone. And we have the ability to submit that application online on your behalf if you're not able to do that.
Yep. And we all absolutely, what you were just saying, Jane, we have to all work together. And I'll mention again, it's in the chat, the link to our website, the www.njoag.gov. But I'm so glad that everybody's saying it, also your contact information, because we might have people listening today, not watching us. So it's so important that we're all recognizing that everyone is getting information differently. Navneet, I know you can speak to 2 different avenues of services, Manavi and how someone can reach out, but also on behalf of the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence.
Yes.
Domestic violence victim in any county, in any place in the state can get help. So I'm going to have you talk to those victims and tell them how they can reach out.
Yes, absolutely. Like I said earlier, the coalition represents and supports 32 programs across the state. So what you can do is you can go on the website, it's njcedv.org, and you can actually find the program in your specific area, in your county, and see, what services are basically available. And the coalition has done a great job in ensuring that different programs are connected to each other, and also that they're sharing resources. So ultimately all survivors can access those services. And also at Manavi, we have 2 offices. One is New Brunswick and one is Paterson. And Paterson office, we ensure that we focus on the Bangladeshi community, because we also understand that there's certain communities who are on the margin of the margins and really need to access services. Our hotline I already shared, but again, 732 1-435-1414. It's 24 hours, and we speak a range of South Asian languages. Email is manavi@manavi.org, and the social media you can get from the website, manavi.org. And yes, please know that you are not alone. We believe you, and we are all in this together to support you.
And Navneet, something important is that even with COVID, police departments and agencies are open to take restraining order applications. The courts are open. Just because of COVID doesn't mean there's not access. We want everybody to know you can go to your local police department if you need help 24/7 in person. You can call 911. You can reach out to service agencies. We can't stress that enough. If you are in an emergency situation, please call 911. Just so you know that there's all of these service providers there to lend assistance. And I think the last thing we should talk about, it doesn't really matter what kind of technology you have, right? It seems like to me that we can get to you for help on the phone, right? We can all get phone, but also text messages, right? I think one of the most important, and we can talk, and Navneet, you might want to mention about this with domestic violence. We know staying at home didn't mean staying safe. And if you're home with an abuser and you can't pick up the phone, there's text chat. We can get to you by text. So there's other mechanisms. And have you seen that being used during COVID where someone can't pick up the phone and say, I need help?
Yes. There have been many situations where we've actually had survivors. I mean, we've had situations where survivors have actually said that I have a 10-minute window when I go out to put the garbage and then do something and come back, and that's when I can either call, or with even messaging. I know there's many agencies that do a great job in making sure that text messaging is a way to contact. For the survivors that we work with, some of our staff, they have said that they've been contacting them, whether it's through WhatsApp, messaging, and really that has become an amazing tool and a safe tool, because making phone calls has not been an option, or not a safe option for a lot of survivors. So yes, absolutely. Like I said, unconventional ways. But I think that may be the only good thing that's come out of COVID, is that we have been forced in a good way to navigate alternative ways to reach our survivors.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we know not everyone can pick up the phone and say, I need help. Not everybody has a laptop, a computer, a phone. So, we're trying, and we're going to keep expanding on how we can make sure that everyone is getting access to services. But I think social media, everybody here has social media platforms. And the biggest thing, please check out the Attorney General's website, again, www.njoag.gov, for links to these resources, including links of how you can text to get help if you can't make an important phone call. I think this has been a fantastic panel, and I want to thank all of you specifically for all that you do and all you do to serve the residents in New Jersey, and all your agencies that you represent, and every single service provider that is working tirelessly. We've had law enforcement, prosecutors, advocates, service providers, forensic nurse examiners, shelter workers, the list goes on, that have helped to make sure that everyone out there knows they are not alone. COVID-19 was not going to stop any of you or your agencies from being there for victims and survivors and crime witnesses as well. And I just thank you. And thanks to all of you for watching today. Just know that help is there if you need it. At this point, I'm going to turn the program over to Mary Ellen for our very special presentation of our 2021 Office of the Attorney General Excellence Awards for Victims' Justice. Mary Ellen?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Jen. I would like now to present the Office of the Attorney General's Excellence Awards to two noteworthy individuals from across the state for their firm commitment to ensuring crime victims receive respect and justice from the criminal system. These deserving award winners are highly esteemed in their fields for their dedication in helping victims and survivors navigate the criminal justice system. Because most of this virtual crime victim rights event was pre-recorded, I will be presenting both awards first, and then we will hear a few words from the award recipients. The first award presented today is the Crime Victim Rights Award. This award reflects this year's theme, support victims, build trust, engage communities. And it is being presented to an individual whose actions capture the spirit of the theme, a pioneer in victims' rights movement, an activist who sought progress from pain, a visionary looking to further innovate, and strives to enhance the services provided to victims in this state. This year's Crime Victims' Rights Award is presented to Sierra Hart. Sierra is the Housing and Economic Justice Manager for the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence. She is a multicultural survivor advocate with unique perspectives who has been advocating for survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, and sexual violence for over a decade. Sierra has been involved in various advocacy initiatives to help survivors heal, restore, and renew their lives. Sierra is deeply involved in advocacy for survivors from marginalized communities. Her community activism is focused on identifying and breaking down barriers that keep survivors from surviving and thriving in society. Sierra has always had a passion for housing advocacy and addressing the intersection of domestic violence, homelessness, and racial justice issues. Since joining NJCEDV in December of 2019, Sierra has worked to address programmatic inequities and to ensure and enhance survivors' access to financial empowerment resources, housing, and safety. Outside of work, Sierra is a single mother of 4 active children. She is also a community activist and leader. Sierra can be found coaching various sports and assisting with school and community activities. She is a member and chair of the newly formed Unity Committee in her community. Sierra helps foster working relationships and inspires others to use their voice to speak up and to speak about injustices in the community. Activism, advocacy, and empowerment isn't just a job or a task, it's her calling. The second award today is the Endurance Award. This award honors a victim witness coordinator, advocate, or a staff member who consistently sets the standard for excellence by going above and beyond to assist victims and prosecution teams. This award does not require decades of service, but recognizes one's perseverance in providing quality assistance to victims. This year's Endurance Award is presented to Diane Johnson. Diane began her career as a multidisciplinary team coordinator. Since that time, she has been the backbone of victim support at the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office. Diane managed and organized one of the first MDT teams in the state. Regardless of whether a child abuse case was prosecuted, Diane ensured that each victim received proper services. In 2003, Diane was instrumental in creating the Victim Advocacy Center at the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, which has the distinction of being the only advocacy center in the state that not only assists with child abuse victims, but victims of all different types of crimes. In her role as MDT coordinator, Diane identified a need for a non-offender parent support group. Diane organized the group with the help of trained therapists in sexual abuse and assisted with applying for grant money from the National Children's Alliance, ensuring that non-offender parents had the support and services they needed so that abused children would be going home to a welcoming, ready, and stable hands. Diane became Victim Witness Coordinator in 2016 on the heels of the implementation of criminal justice reform, and met the demands of the reform by making sure an advocate is working 6 days a week to notify victims of detention or release decisions. Diane has built strong relationships with partner agencies and organizations. In 2020, recognizing there was a need to provide services to child victims of domestic violence, she partnered with Women Aware to bring a family justice center to Middlesex County Child Advocacy Center. Now, adults and child victims have access to counseling, legal services, and housing liaisons directly at that center. Diane has devoted her life to child protection and victim advocacy. She has served as chairperson of the MDT Coordinators Association. She has been a member of the National American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, the New Jersey chapter on National American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, the Child Protection Committee, New Jersey's Children's Alliance, New Jersey Task Force on Child Abuse and Neglect, and the Middlesex County Commission on Child Abuse and Missing Children. Diane has set the gold standard. She has gone above and beyond and is one of the most dedicated advocates, sacrificing her own time to serve the most vulnerable. I can only say that Diane is a model for what any organization would hope for in an MDT or victim witness coordinator. Congratulations to you both, Sierra and Diane. I now turn the comm over to Tara to hear a few words of acceptance from our award recipients. Thank you.
I am so grateful and honored to be chosen to receive the Endurance Award this year during National Crime Victims' Rights Week. I have been working with crime victims for the past 29 years and am inspired every day by all of us that stand together to assist victim survivors and their families. First and foremost, I want to thank my family for their love and support over the years. Thank you to Prosecutor Ciccone and First Assistant Prosecutor Christopher Kuberite for supporting me and the Victim Witness Advocacy Unit as we continue to strive and provide comprehensive services to our victims and their families. Special Victims Unit Section Chief Christy Bavacqua was instrumental in my nomination for this award. I would not be able to achieve all of the work on behalf of our victims without her support and guidance over the years. Working with victims and their families requires the cooperation of assistant prosecutors, police officers, medical and mental health professionals, all coming together to provide victim-centered services. I have been so fortunate throughout the years to have had a team of professionals by my side through the triumphs and the struggles. I would also like to thank all of our partner agencies who work tirelessly to ensure our victim survivors are supported. Lastly, thank you to all of you here today that never give up on preserving the rights of victim survivors and their families. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to have been chosen for this award. It is certainly a proud and humbling experience for me. I want to sincerely thank the Office of the Attorney General for considering me for this award. I would also like to thank my team at the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence for their endless support. Without it, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I'm able to do. And I want to thank the numerous mentors, advocates, and survivors who have pushed me to do the work that I do. You are my why. That's why I stay at the table. Thank you to my children and my family for continuing to support the work that I do. And I just want to leave you with a quote that drove me to continue to do the work and stay at the table, especially through the past year. And it's a quote by Robert Ingersoll that says, "We rise by lifting others." So thank you again.
2020 was such a challenging year.
And 2021 has brought new hope.
But we are still facing obstacles.
But one thing that has remained constant
is our dedication to serving crime victims and survivors.
We know that staying home did not always mean staying safe.
And we know that COVID-19 did not make lives better.
We know we couldn't always meet you in person.
But it was us on the other end of that call.
Trying our best to help and care and comfort.
So Crime Victims' Rights Week seems like a good time to remind you
that we are still here
and that you are not alone.
We stand here renewing our commitment to support crime victims and survivors,
to build trust, and to engage our communities.
We are here for you,
and we are not going anywhere.
That concludes today's event. Thank you to everyone for joining us today.